Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, looking at all of the new releases, especially Ghostbusters Afterlife, and talking about where Eternals is heading, and also how No Time to Die is just the film that will not die and is actually getting very close to the bare minimum break-even number that it has, unless, of course, you are taking into account various other marketing costs that we don't actually have any official numbers on. So all we really have are, as I said, the numbers that are available to us. So this is a movie that likely could break even by next weekend. And that is all thanks to a domestic, or rather, in this case, an international market that for some reason is just going gaga for this incredibly subpar release. But before we go any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. Also hit the rumble button and make sure you subscribe to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So Ghostbusters Afterlife is the big story of this weekend because it made $44 million. That is a big deal because Sony did not have a lot of confidence in this movie. They did not think that this movie was going to be that successful. One of the early signs of that is the fact that this film had half of the budget of the Ghostbusters from 2016. Now, I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that Ghostbusters 2016 was a massive flop and also just was not a good movie, well received at all by any of the actual fans. Critics, of course, ate it up because, of course, they would. But this is a situation where we're finally getting a Ghostbusters film that the vast majority of people going to see it have really enjoyed. The word of mouth has been so positive on it that it's actually doing a lot better. In fact, it's $14 million essentially over, 14 to 19 million over where Sony's projections were. They had it around $20 to $30 million or $25 to $30 million domestically. And then it's even about $4 million over where the updated box office projections were as of yesterday. So originally they were saying, oh yeah, based on the Friday numbers, 40.5 million is likely going to be the case. $44 million. So that is something, too, that could still change. We could actually see the film get closer to 46 or maybe even 48. And if it gets to those territories, when we get the actuals, they usually update either Monday or Tuesday, that could mean that Ghostbusters Afterlife, not only is it overperforming, but also could end up being a bigger box office opening, even adjusted for inflation, than Ghostbusters 2016. But that's a lot of ifs. And at the very least, even if it doesn't beat Ghostbusters 2016, which is as of right now, it is not, I have no doubt in my mind that by the end of next weekend, it will have beaten the movie because, of course, of the Thanksgiving break coming up and the fact that this film is doing incredibly well amongst younger audiences, but also family audiences as well, as this is not a kids movie, as some people are trying to spin this as, because it's really not. It is a family movie, and Thanksgiving, of course, very much about families, and I think that this is a really good one to go and watch with your family. So anyway, let's go ahead and break into the numbers. So Ghostbusters Afterlife coming in domestically with $44 million. So again, massive opening for that movie compared to what their projections were initially. Eternals from Disney in its third week of release finally gets dropped out of the number one spot, now with actual competition. And look at that drop, 60% drop. So this movie is dropping like a fly here in the domestic market, $135.8 million. It's tracking well behind where even Black Widow was at this point in time. So we can expect this film to maybe cap out closer to that $150 to $165 million range. The only thing keeping this movie alive is the international numbers, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we break down the numbers officially. But basically, where this film is failing domestically, which it totally is, it is doing a lot better internationally. In fact, it's already, after just a few weeks, beaten the entire international totals of Black Widow and Shang-Chi. So once again, if it gets saved, it's only going to be because of the international box office there. Clear for the Big Red Dog had a 51% drop in its second week. This is a movie that also had release on Paramount Plus. So this is a film that, even though it only costs about $50 million to make, is likely going to be a box office failure. Again, not taking into account any Paramount Plus numbers. King Richard, a brand new movie from Warner Brothers about the the Williams sisters, Serena and Venus, a film that clearly no one seems to care about, which, hey, it's fine by me because I don't know why we're making a movie about them right now anyway. But hey, King Richard, not doing well. $5.7 million there. Of course, it is Warner Brothers, and so HBO Max does have a role to play there. But Dune, another HBO Max release, a Warner Brothers release, was able to fight that off because it was a film that people said, hey, you know what? This is a movie that's worth going to see in theaters, and that still seems to be holding up with very small drop-offs in its later weeks. Obviously, the week 1 to week 2 drop-off was okay. But in the week, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and now 4 to 5, we're seeing, again, numbers in the 30s and 40s, which is a pretty strong holdover domestically. The issue, of course, as I've mentioned from the very beginning when I did my first projections on this film not being a box office success, is the fact that it is just not having any room or any time left really to make money internationally, which is where this film was out for a long time before its domestic release, and so it's pretty much spent in all the countries that is available. So this movie will cross $100 million domestically, so that is, again, a pretty good sign for a film that had to compete against itself on HBO Max, but it's also one that, even though the international numbers are relatively strong, still looks like it's going to fall short of the break-even number of around $412 million. Again, this is not including HBO Max numbers or any other type of revenue. Just based on pure box office, the film is still likely to be a financial loss. Still could get close enough to be able to say, hey, 4K sales, Blu-ray sales, Steelbook sales could make up for that loss, but raw box office, not really looking like it's in the cards for that movie. Venom, on the other hand, continues just to make massive amounts of money. It's well over $100 million net gain profit at this point in time. Even after 8 weeks, it's still making $2.7 million. Again, never thought that Venom 2 would be this successful during pandemic times especially. And then there's No Time to Die, which has been out for 7 weeks. Another 40% drop here, $2.7 million. Domestically, not really that special, $154 million. Been tons of films this year that have done a lot better than that one. In fact, Eternals likely will end with a much higher number than that by the end of its run. But where No Time to Die is just insanely overperforming is in that international, where it's got over like $500 million in the international market. So again, that's a movie that is looking like it's going to break even, or at least get close enough to the break-even point to justify saying, yeah, you know what? After Blu-ray, 4K sales, tax breaks, other things like that, other revenue streams, I think it's hard to really argue that the film was not able to somehow make at least a little bit of money. And that's a film that no one was really expecting to, very little people at the very least, were expecting to be able to kind of get back in any way because especially of its domestic opening and just terrible domestic performance. So going into Ghostbusters, it opened up to $60 million internationally, so that's actually far ahead of their initial estimates. They were originally saying around $44 million internationally, so getting to $60 million, overperforming there, which is a good sign for this movie. However, as I said, this film, at least domestically, is still tracking behind the 2016 Ghostbusters. When you adjust that for inflation, you can see just how far behind the movie it is. It's only about $4 million or so behind where Ghostbusters 2016 was at the time of its release. Here's the thing, though. This is pandemic times. This is also one that was given half the money that the other one was given. This one was obviously given a lot of praise from critics as well, whereas this one seems to me that the critics are just going after this film because they don't want it to be as highly praised as this one. It's like they just want to go after this film because they don't want their coveted Ghostbusters 2016 to be shown for the complete crap fest that the film actually was. Well, here's the issue. Even though it is tracking ahead, right? Ghostbusters 2016 was tracking ahead. Where this movie, Afterlife, has a lot of room to grow is this week, which of course is Thanksgiving week. So I would expect to see some pretty high numbers here in the week and then during the weekend as well, as people will be off at school. Yes, absolutely. We'll have people who will be going on vacations, and so it's not always a guarantee that you're going to have a lot of people show up. But because this film is connecting a lot with families, a lot of parents who have their kids home with them for an extended period of time are going to say, all right, let's get out of the house, let's go see a movie. Hey, this one seems to be getting a pretty good response. Let's go ahead and see this instead. So I think that that's probably the likely scenario of what's going to happen. I would say by next weekend, then it seems likely that this film will be ahead of that. Now, I will eat some crow because I was expecting this film to overperform a lot more than this. I was saying closer maybe to $60 million. I was obviously wrong on that point. So, hey, mea culpa, I was wrong on that, but still it did overperform. So I was right to some extent, but obviously I did overproject. So once again, eating that crow. King Richard, again, a film that I still ask, why are we having a film now about the Williams sisters? I feel like this is a film that you make, years down the road maybe, but $8.2 million internationally. No one's going to see this movie. Looks like another box office failure for Warner Brothers. Clifford the Big Red Dog still only doing anything domestically with its Paramount Plus day-and-date release as well. So again, $50 million budget makes this film likely to be a massive failure. All right, talking about Eternals, $200.3 million internationally. This is the only reason why I'm even saying that there's a chance that the film either breaks even or at least gets close to a break-even number. It has lost some steam, so I'm less confident in that projection than I was originally, but it is still going to likely be not as massive of a financial loss. This is a movie that likely will cross $400 million, I would imagine, by next weekend, or at least get close to it, which would, again, put it within $100 million or so of that break-even point, which means that you could get it close enough to be able to justify it with Blu-ray 4K sales down the road. However, with that being said, when you do compare this film to the others, Black Widow and Shang-Chi, the other MCU films that come out this year, it is still clearly not a great domestic release. So $135 million is where that film is right now. It's not likely going to get anywhere close to the 183 of Black Widow. No chance in hell it's going to get to Shang-Chi's 224, but it has already surpassed those two films internationally. So do expect this film to make a bit more as it continues to be released. Also, I would say I expect this film to be the highest grossing MCU film this year, and it will surpass that of Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings. But as I said, because of having a much bigger budget than Shang-Chi did, and obviously a lot of delays, etc., it's not going to be a huge box office success by any means. So when I say break even, when I say make profit, we're talking very, very small return on its investment. But as you can see, domestically, it is just not showing up at all. And you see it's very much tracking far behind where Black Widow was at the same time of its release, well far behind where Shang-Chi was. So expect this film to be a massive failure. Dune, as I mentioned, right, it is doing well internationally as far as the overall total is concerned. It's just, again, running out of time, running out of space. So $367 million, it's just, again, it's not growing enough in these week-to-week numbers to likely get to the $412 million it needs to make to break even. Obviously, we can argue, okay, what about HBO Max and other revenue streams? Okay, yeah, it's going to get close enough so that you could argue that in the end, it's going to be a write-off for Warner Brothers because it's going to have made money up in other areas. But as far as an actual film and the actual box office numbers as they stand, film still is a financial failure. And then we get to No Time to Die, $734 million. Again, 579.4. I don't know why I don't know what's going on internationally, right? United Kingdom is showing up in droves for this, $124 million from them, $72 million from Germany, so $60 million from China. So even if you take into account that they get barely anything from that communist country, you still have to think to yourself, okay, it's doing well enough in those other countries, though, where you're looking at a scenario where this film's going to reach that break-even number. Again, we can argue about, hey, but because of this massive discrepancy between the domestic and international, doesn't that likely mean that it's not going to be as successful because it gets less from the international and more from the domestic, and since this is the smaller number and this is the bigger number? Yeah, you probably could make that argument, but again, just based on what we see, I think at the end of the day, we have to take into account this film is likely going to at least get to a point where United Artists is going to be relatively happy with its overall performance, even though I said, look, 21% of the entire share of its box office coming domestically. I don't quite understand why anyone's going to see this movie. All right, let's go ahead and go into the box office tracking. Look at some charts here. All right, so we got, as I mentioned earlier, Ghostbusters Afterlife. Right now, it's at $76.5 million in the loss, and against opening weekend, I suspect this number will be cut probably in half by the end of next weekend, maybe more, but the break-even number of this film is $187.5 million. I think this film is going to very easily reach that amount, so if there's anything positive that can be said about Ghostbusters Afterlife not getting the same budget as 2016's, is that it has to make a lot less in order to break even, and because it actually is a fun movie, and because it's a film that actually fans are enjoying, it has a much better chance of that actually happening. So we'll be, of course, tracking this film, tracking to see the week 2 drop-off for it, but things are looking pretty good as far as the long-term projections for Ghostbusters Afterlife are concerned, so it likely will be a nice little moneymaker, probably, for Sony, and Sony's done pretty well this year. $70 million currently loss for King Richard. As I said before, $125 million is actually its break-even number because of the production budget, because of the total marketing. This is a movie that's not likely going to get that, so Warner Brothers, again, continues to put out box office failures a lot. You have also here, this is Clifford the Big Red Dog, right now at a $75 million loss, likely going to be a financial failure for that movie. You also have $336 million for Eternals, and as I said this last week, it's going to either lose somewhere around $58 million or make as much as $37 million net gain or net loss. So we're looking at a number that it's going to get to a point where it'll get at least close enough for someone to probably be able to make the argument that Disney can write that film off. So this is not a Jungle Cruise situation where it's like over $100 million loss. This is a movie that is most likely going to get pretty close to that number. As you can see, what we have for No Time to Die, let me go ahead and update this chart real quick as I updated the numbers. Just recently, with the $734 million that No Time to Die has made, look at that. It's only at a $9 million loss. So very, very good chance that this movie is able to reach that number by the end of next weekend because of the Thanksgiving break here, and of course because it is still doing well internationally. So again, very much off what the original projections were. Original projections, I had this film losing anywhere between $45 and $160 million. That is not happening. Again, internationally, just went bonkers for this movie. Even domestically, it's actually tracking on the stronger side of things as well, even though it's not overall a strong film. So it had a very weak opening weekend, and so that had a lot to do with this film, but the legs on the film have actually been relatively strong domestically, despite it not being, again, a good opening release, but internationally, this is where that film is just, again, blowing things just completely out of the water. Venom 2, as I said, $107.8 million in the black. Again, that's a massive gain for Sony. Sony's going to have a lot to be thankful for because, as I said, Ghostbusters likely going to have a very, very similar number in that department. But anyway, that is the breakdown. What are your thoughts about these numbers? Do you think that Ghostbusters Afterlife is going to have a pretty massive week because of it going to appeal to younger audiences and families over Thanksgiving? And do you think Eternals has a chance? Technically, there's a chance. And No Time to Die, are you surprised that No Time to Die is actually reaching that point of it likely being profitable? I will say, again, though my estimates were off, I did try and do kind of a broken model for that. That's why you have these lines through these numbers here, because we didn't really have a typical 2-week number to base off of anything because of how this film was staggered in its release internationally. But hey, I did put those projections out there, and so I will definitely say that even if I had the numbers, I don't think me or most people would have ever expected that film to do as well as it is doing. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about that or anything else I mentioned in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button, smash and hit the rumble button. Also light up the fire button as well. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my November Patreon, Subscribestar, and Locals members. Starting first off with Patreon, Andrew Hoyle, animation commentator, Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dolores Ed, Dion, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob the Juice, JC, Jeffrey Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyle 79, Laura the Modern Major General Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ullen, Stan Andrian, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B, the Empress of the Universe. And a shout out to my Subscribestar members, UAB, Mad Dog, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stan 4, John B, Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J, Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, and J Rod, the Beer Guru, and of course, ZK Man. Thank you very much for supporting me over there. And to my 3 supporters over on locals.com, Kara Tharp, Bifford a Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people, and if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and every video I do on the channel, check out that top link in the description below to find out how to sign up to the various levels that exist, including the most basic level where you get a shout out, the secondary level, the Army of Asgard, where you get that, plus access to a giveaways exclusive server where I give away things like 4Ks and Blu-rays and digital codes. All kinds of stuff, a lot of fun. You then also have the Keeper of the Bifrost level where you get all that stuff, plus access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger. You get to ask us questions, and you get also access to that and the entire library of podcast episodes that we have done. And then there is, of course, the Chosen of Valhalla level, where not only do you get all of that, but also in your first month, you get a t-shirt of your choice and sent to you anywhere in the world. Of course, just let me know your size and the color option that you want. It'll be sent to you that first month. And also, you get to be featured on the once a month Chosen of Valhalla live stream, where we have a ton of fun talking about movies and projects and all kinds of stuff. Pretty much anything that the Chosen wants to talk about is on the table. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out that top link. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.